Welcome to Oasis, where stories soothe your mind and whisper you into restful sleep. The Rhône River stretched out in the May evening breeze, its waters breaking the last remnants of daylight into shimmering golden flakes. Vincent van Gogh's boots sank into the damp reeds, and the clasps on his paintbox jingled softly with each step, like a string of out-of-tune bells. He deliberately avoided the riverbank where clusters of white campions bloomed. 3 days ago, a storm had washed away an ant nest there, leaving behind his torn sketches, now dissolving into blurred grey clouds in the water. By the time he counted the 47th star, the gas lamps across the river suddenly flickered to life, their amber halos rippling over the waves. The sight reminded him of his mother polishing the brass candlesticks in their old home in Zundert. Those candlesticks were always placed on the third shelf of the oak cabinet, beside his father's silver cross for preaching. On Christmas Eve, when he was 15, he had secretly drawn a raven with candle wax on the inside of the cabinet door. Now, that black bird suddenly took flight from the depths of his memory, soaring past the shimmering light spots dancing on his retina. "Counting stars again, sir." Joseph Rhône, the postman, approached, his uniform buttons glinting in the twilight. He held a letter stamped from Paris. "Mr. Theo says the newborn smiles at the sunflowers painting above his cradle." Van Gogh noticed a wilted silver lotus pinned to Joseph's collar, which reminded him of the time he had seen this postman in the cemetery, arranging wildflowers at an unmarked grave. Perhaps every resident of Arles carried a piece of the starry sky within them, he thought, just like the seemingly chaotic strokes in his paintings, always swirling with unspoken whispers beneath the surface. A sudden gust swept across the river, making the edges of his canvas flap against the easel. He saw a deep blue mist rising from the water, and the stars, interrupted by Joseph's arrival, resumed their quiet dance in the rippling reflections. As his palette knife scraped thick layers of white paint, the old engravings on the handle pressed into his thumb, a birthday gift from Thea when he turned 25. Back then, his brother had even commissioned someone to etch a Sanskrit phrase onto the steel. "Creation is eternity." Now, the letters had been blurred by years of turpentine, just like the carved wooden bed they had shared as children, slowly eaten away by woodworms in the attic of their Zundert home. The brass oil lamp cast flickering halos onto the pinewood floor. Van Gogh's shadow stretched over the oak table, piled high with sketches, sometimes merging with the dried paint stains on the walls. Those overlapping patches of colour felt like fragments of time, frozen in layers. Peacock green from an olive grove he painted last autumn. Crimson smudges from a sunrise painted in a drunken haze. At this moment, his silhouette aligned perfectly with the self-portrait he had painted 3 months ago. The bandaged left ear on the canvas casting a jagged shadow on the wall, like a cypress tree split by lightning. The sound of him biting open a new tube of paint startled the tabby cat on the windowsill. The instant cobalt blue oozed out. The animal's emerald eyes reflected the trembling night sky. He recalled a bald professor at the Paris Academy of Fine Arts scoffing, "Your use of blue is almost pathological." In response, he had squeezed out every shade of blue from his palette, blending them into a muddy mess in his palm. But now, the Rhone's night wind seeped through the window cracks, forming delicate wrinkles in the wet paint. This was a living colour, a blue that breathed. The mingling scents of turpentine and absinthe created an odd fragrance in the studio. In the ceramic pot that Marguerite had given him, a few dried lavender stems curved in an arc that mirrored the spirals of the cypress trees in his painting. As he lifted a stroke of chrome yellow with his palette knife, he suddenly realized he was recreating an old memory. Women at the wool workshop in Zundert, hanging golden-dyed yarn on oak racks to dry. When the southern wind passed through, the entire workshop rippled with waves of liquid sunlight. The church bells rang precisely at 3:17 a.m., shaking loose dried specks of cobalt blue from his palette knife. The sound took him back to Saint-Remy Asylum nights, where iron bars carved the moonlight into pale rectangles. After one of his epileptic seizures, he had woken to find himself tracing spiral patterns onto the lime-washed walls with his fingernails, just like the swirling stars now consuming his canvas. The caretaker claimed his screams had startled an entire vineyard's worth of starlings into flight, but all he remembered was dreaming of a burning blue horse, its hooves tearing open the indigo sky. The first rays of morning climbed over the window frame as Marguerite entered the studio with a tray of freshly baked almond biscuits. She noticed scattered paint tubes on the floor. One of them, a cadmium red, flattened underfoot, its crumpled body marked by clear teeth impressions. It reminded her of how her late husband used to bite through twine when tying grapevines in the vineyard. Artists and farmers, she suddenly realized, shared a primal urge to create. Just as wine ferments in oak barrels, so do colors undergo unseen chemical reactions on canvas. "Your stars are breathing," she said, wiping dew off the ceramic pot with the corner of her apron. Her Provence-accented words carried the warmth of a baking oven. Jean, the blacksmith, said those swirls make him hear the sea waves from his youth. Van Gogh thought of Jean's hands, scarred from countless burns, hands that could forge the intricate ironwork for church rose windows, yet trembled like spiderwebs in the wind when caressing a newborn's cheek. Perhaps art itself was a gentle form of violence, he mused, staring at his cracked nails, just like the way the night sky softly tears apart the darkness. The scent of yeast drifted in from the bakery on the eastern square. Standing before his drying canvas, he bit into a cold fig, its overly ripe sweetness making him frown. The taste oddly overlapped with Theo's description of the newborn's milky scent in his letters. Perhaps all new life carried a hint of fermentation, just like the titanium white solidifying on his canvas, both an end and a beginning. In the morning light, he noticed the letter he had tossed aside last night. In the corner, he had absent-mindedly sketched a cradle in orange pencil, and inside it, the baby's pupils were two swirling stars. As the morning mist drifted over the tiled roof of the yellow house in Arles, he pressed his paint-stained fingers onto Theo's envelope, leaving a smudged indigo fingerprint. This could be the first star his nephew ever receives, or just the confused mark of a madman before dawn. But at this moment, The Rhone's mist was swallowing the stars from the night before, leaving only the cobalt blue on his canvas glowing ever brighter, just like the forget-me-not he had hidden in his sleeve on the day of his mother's funeral, blooming quietly in the darkness of the hearse